Today we're going back to 1951 to explore the Exakta VX and how it helps set the stage for the eventual global takeover of the 35mm SLR. Stay tuned. Exakta cameras can trace their lineage all the way back to 1912 when Johann Steenbergen, a Dutch national, opened his camera company in Dresden, Germany. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce the original full name of the company, but it eventually became known by the acronym IHG, which when pronounced in German is Ihagee. And that's the name you'll see associated with most Exakta cameras. The historical significance of Ihagee can't be understated, as they are credited with having the first successful production run of a single-lens reflex camera using 35mm film, all the way back in 1936. This camera was the Ihagee Exakta, and it used a waist-level finder to allow photographers to actually see through the lens that was mounted to the camera. But prior to the release of the Ihagee Exakta, Ihagee had already been credited with several firsts. They were the first to include an actual lever for winding the film instead of a knob, and they were the first to include a special socket for using flash that could be triggered by the shutter. In addition to these fairly unique features for the time, Exakta cameras would include many additional features that would go on to be standard offerings associated with professional level models. A 1/1000th of a second shutter speed, and slow shutter speeds that could be as low as 12 seconds. With the release of the Exakta Varex in 1950, interchangeable prism finders and focusing screens would be added to the list of premium features. But between 1951 and 1956, the Exakta Varex VX was produced, and that's what we have here. Now, Ihagee didn't produce any lenses of their own. Instead, they used lenses from the top optical manufacturers of the day, such as Zeiss, Meyer, and Schneider, names you probably associate with top quality optics. And to illustrate just how premium this camera was for the time, I recently found an Exakta VX price sheet for the US market. The camera body, with standard waist level finder and the Carl Zeiss Jena 58 f2 lens, which is this lens, was listed as $353 US. Adding a pentaprism viewfinder would cost you another $50, bringing the total to over $400 US in 1951, which was a lot of money. If you adjust that for inflation, that would be equal to over $4,600 of US money today. So yeah, the Exakta was definitely meant to be a top-tier camera. Now, even though we have all of these premium features on the VX, ones that we take for granted today and are completely familiar with, when you look at the camera, something looks a bit odd. And that's because most of the controls are over on the left side of the camera. We have the shutter release on the left front, the high-speed shutter selector, and the film counter and winding lever all on the same shoulder. And the film counter must be reset manually once you load the film. The high-speed shutter speed range is 1/25th of a second to 1/1000th, plus B and T. The only control on the right is the slow speed shutter selector and timer. The slow shutter speeds available are from 1/5 second all the way down to 12 seconds. Using these slower speeds is a bit tricky, but we'll come back to this in a few minutes. Back over on the left near the shutter speed selector and winding lever is the film rewind lever. Flipping this lever up will disengage the winding gear and allow you to rewind the film, which is accomplished by the knob on the bottom of the camera on the right. Pressing in the central portion of the knob will engage the rewind fork with the film cartridge spool. Just keep it pressed in as you turn the knob clockwise until you feel the film tension released. I'm glad they eventually started using rewind levers because using the knob takes a while. To open the camera back, turn and pull down the knob on the bottom left of the camera. You can see that the film transport goes from right to left instead of left to right like we're normally used to. And while we're talking about the film transport, notice that the take-up spool is removable. And there's a cool reason for that. Have you ever been halfway through a roll of film and just run out of things to photograph? Yep, me too. But you end up either leaving the film in the camera for weeks until you get inspired again, or you just rewind the film as is and process it and waste half of the roll. Well, the Exakta VX offers a solution. Instead of the take-up spool, you can insert another film cartridge in its place. So as you shoot, The exposed film is transported into the take-up cartridge. If you run out of inspiration after half the roll is shot, you can use the included film knife to cut the roll, wind the exposed film into the take-up cartridge, and remove it for processing. This leaves the unexposed film in the supply cartridge that you can shoot later. Alright, so let's look at the steps. This is a bit fiddly, so bear with me. First, remove the take-up spool. Second, you'll put the film cartridge in normally, even though it's on the right in the Exakta. Next, pull the film leader across and attach to the spool in the take-up cartridge. Close that cartridge in the camera back and you're ready to shoot. When you're at the point where you're done for the day, don't wind that last shot just yet. You'll loosen the film knife knob on the bottom right of the camera and pull it down so that it cuts through the film. Push the knife back up and retighten. Then use the wind lever to wind the last shot into the take-up cartridge. Open the back, take out the exposed cartridge to get ready for processing. Let's take a look at what's actually happening in the camera when you do this. I'm going to do this with the camera back open so you can see, but obviously you wouldn't do this with the back open. So you'll start by loosening the film knife knob. And then you pull it down so that it cuts the film. And then you can wind that last exposed frame into the take-up cartridge. And I'd go ahead and trip the shutter and wind it once more just to ensure that the last shot is completely in the cartridge. It's a pretty neat solution if I say so myself. Alright, so now let's get back to the slow shutter speeds and show how they work. First thing you have to do is to make sure the film is wound and the shutter is cocked. Next, I'm going to turn this entire slow speed knob clockwise until it stops. This winding will set the tension for all the available speeds marked on the slow speed dial. Once it's wound, you can lift up the outer ring on the dial and rotate it to where your desired shutter speed is adjacent to the selection mark. The outer dial is like the high-speed selector in that it will fall into place for each setting. So next, I'm going back over to the high-speed dial and set the shutter to T. And now you're ready to take the photo. You press the shutter release and it will trigger the winder and the shutter will stay open for the time you choose. That's it. Now you're ready for the next shot. Now, usually when a shutter is set for the T setting, it means that it will stay open until you press the shutter release again. But when you are in the slow speed mode on the Exakta, it will close automatically after the timing is run. If you wind the slow speed dial before you wind the film and cock the shutter, it will unwind as soon as you let go. Cocking the shutter beforehand will lock the slow speed mechanism in place so you can make your shutter speed selection and get ready for the next shot. Let's take a look at the lens. So this is the Carl Zeiss Jena 58mm f2. It's a Biotar design and was the premium lens for this camera. It sports a 12-bladed diaphragm, and that's pretty impressive. It's a preset aperture design, so after determining your correct exposure by handheld light meter or Sunny 16 rule or whatever, you will lift the aperture ring and set it to the correct f-stop. And in this case, I'm going to go to f11. Then you can rotate the main aperture ring to f2, which is full aperture on this lens. And now you can easily focus and compose your shot. When you're satisfied with the composition, you'll rotate the main aperture ring to stop it down. And it will automatically stop at the f-stop you previously set. So you don't have to take your eye away from the camera to make sure it's correct. Now, I'll admit, this is not going to be intuitive for me. Probably nothing about the operation of this camera is. I'm going to be dealing with left-hand controls and a manual preset lens, which is completely foreign to me. And add to that, I've never shot this camera before. Well, it could be an interesting shoot. But of course, I'll film it so y'all can experience the highs and lows right along with me. As for the shoot, I've got to attend a meeting up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I'm planning on taking the scenic route on the way back. So a road trip photo shoot. Hopefully I'll find some interesting spots, so I'll catch up with you there. Right now I am in Chickamauga, Georgia at the Lee and Gordon Mill, and it has just come a rainstorm, so I'm sort of waiting that out. But we'll be out here in just a second and get some shooting done. And I'll make a few stops along the way back home to shoot the rest of the film. So let's go. All right, so like I said, I have got the Exakta VX out here. Got some rolls of Kentmere 100, and we're gonna start our shoot here at Lee and Gordon's Mill. The rain has stopped. That's nice. It's kind of cooled it off a bit. We'll see what we get here. I'm using my trusty Minolta spot meter out here. I'll meter a highlight, I'll meter a shadow, and we'll average those together to get a good exposure. So obviously the highlight is going to be the siding of the building and the shadows, trees in the background. That's going to give me 1/20th of a second at f8. All right. Let's see. That's all right. So the shutter speed I have is actually 1/50th of a second. I don't have 1/20th as an option, so let's just go with that. All right, full aperture, focusing, and I've got the 50mm lens on here, so probably normally I would have wanted a wide angle for this, but this is what I've got. Right. And let's go with the shot. The controls on this camera are all opposite what they normally would be. The winder is on the left side, the shutter release is on the left side. So it takes a little getting used to. Let's move in a little closer. Because with this 50, I can't get everything in there, so let's do with some details. I do have to remember to stop down. Sun's coming out, so let's re-meter. Highlight, memory, shadow, memory, average, 1/20 at f8, so we're still good. All right. I think I'm just gonna meter a mid-tone here. So 1/20 at 5.6. All right, let's focus. Stop down. Like that. Let's do another one at f4. All right, f4 at 120. I'm gonna move in closer because I like some of this texture here on the wheels where we have a little moss. All right, let's meter that. That's about a middle gray right there, so that should give me, it says f8. Yep, it says f8 at 1/20th. let's change shutter speed to 100 and do that now. All right, focus. All right, got some sun peeking through here. All right, let's do that again at f8. We'll do f11 too, since we've got some sun peeking through. Sort of hard to see when you stop this down though. All right, let's frame up another shot. The way the sun's coming in, it's casting some nice shadows, and we got some good surface texture there. All right, so let's do so there's a highlight, and there's my shadow, f8. Figuring out how to use this lens has been a thing for sure. Let's see. There we go, I like that. All right, stop down. Make sure we're wound. Let's do one at 5.6 as well, since we just lost some sun. And let's go on to f4. Right. Yeah, we've got a couple other shots here. All right, so let's see. Let's meter. Clear it out. There's my highlight. There's my shadow. And 1/20th at f4. All right. Let's do that. I'll be interested to see how this lens does. Stop down, and there's one. Let's do another one there, because I always like to do more than one. All right. One more, we'll get closer here. All right. Highlight. Shadow, and 1/20th at f8. All right, so let's go 150. Let's move it around. Actually, let's go to 250 here. f8. Okay, focused. f8. And let's do one at 5.6. All right. So the big difference out here today is that I have one lens and that's it. So it's keeping it simple, and that's probably going to work out to my benefit. Simplify your shooting. Use one lens. That's always a good sort of a self-assignment. Go out with one lens and shoot with it. And sometimes I find that easier, or sometimes I find that is a lot more productive than having 10 lenses at my disposal. Because if you've seen me do this before, you realize that, you know, I can't be happy with just one lens, and I keep changing, and, you know, that sort of thing. But sort of liberating to only have one lens out here. A couple more shots here, and then we'll move on down the road. All right, I'm gonna shoot this at 1/20th of a second at 2.8. All right, 2.8. Frame it up just a little differently. All right, speeder. It's my highlight. And my shadow. 5.6 at 1/20th of a second. All right, we'll stick with that. Let's get a little closer. And let's do horizontal for good measure. Stop down. All right. Let's move on. I did find one more shot. This one's got a little bit of depth, so I'm going to try to use a little deeper depth of field. So there's a shadow area. That's going to be my highlight. 1/20th at f4. So it's not as deep a depth of field as I wanted, but that's okay. That's what I've got. Stop down, and there we go. I'm gonna do one at 2.8 as well. Shallow depth of field is fine. I should use it more. All right. All right, now let's move on. So I've passed by this old motel several times, and every time I think I'm gonna stop and get a picture of this old sign. It's the Ihagee Motel. And the sign is decrepit. And, but anyway, I'm gonna get a shot of it finally. Shadow. And highlight. Looks like we've got F8 at 1/20. Now let's see. Focusing wide open as usual. All right, and then stop down. Let's do that vertically also. Get closer, get a different angle. Open up to focus. Close down. Let's keep moving south. So I'm out here at Rome, Georgia. Still on my way back home from Chattanooga. And I wanted to stop and check out this bridge where they have all these locks attached to the fencing. Sort of like the locks of love that they have in various places in the world. But there's a lot of locks here. I've been here before, but never with this camera. Let's see if we can find something new. There's one shaped like a turtle. Maybe that one will be first. I'm gonna be just about out of film in a few minutes. I've got like 2 or 3 shots because I keep accidentally hitting the shutter button on the front after I've wound the film. My other Exakta body has a guard that you can flip down over the shutter release that keeps you from doing that. This one does not though. There's my highlight. Well, now the sun's going behind the cloud a second. Just give that a minute. So let's set the thing at 1/500th of a second. All right. Shadow. Highlight. 500 at 5.6. All right, let's focus here. And stop down. Let's open that up one stop because the sun did sort of go back behind the cloud again. All right, so I need to swap out the roll of film. All right, let's see if I can do this. All right, rewind, lever up, press that in. All right. I need to bring a lock out here. Me and my wife, we need to put some up here. All right, I think I got that. Well, we're about to see. Yes, it's done. Good. Let's move on to another spot. See, there we go. Shot it again. All right, dadgummit. Highlight. Shadow. 500 at f4. I'm gonna do 500 at 2.8. So average, so it's a 1/500 at 2.8. Let's go 250 at f4. Set my ring to f4, open up, 250 at f4. Right, all right, let's see. All right, stop down. You know, I'm probably should be able to focus and then set it to the preset without moving my eye away from the camera so I won't lose focus. Yeah, I'm sure that's what should be done. All right, let's try to do this like I'm supposed to. All right, let's see what else. Got shadow area. We've got a highlight area. 250 at f4. So I'm gonna do 250 at f4 as well as 2.8 just to bracket some. Okay, wide open to wind it on. Okay. Let's drop that to 125 or 150 here. And let's do the same thing. Yep. Oh, you're fine. You're fine. Yeah, I'm just setting up. Thank you. Because we got some action shot there. Let's open up to 2.8. All right. Let's see what else we can find here. A couple of interesting ones here. Highly decorated and ornate. Highlight. Shadow. 250 at 2.8.5. Right. So let's go with, let's slow down that shutter speed to 150. Stop down. All right, stop down and fire. So those are fairly interesting. That's an interesting building. Nice architecture, directly lit by the sun. Highlight. Shadow. 500 at f8. Let's go 250 at f11. So the image looked really barrel distorted on the edges. So I don't know if it's just a focusing screen or if it's actually the lens. We will see. So I forgot to hit record again. And so what I'm gonna do is show you what we got. I think this is probably gonna finish the roll up, but the Partridge restaurant sign right there in the background is what we just shot. So I think that'll be a good way to wrap this up. I've got like 4 more shots left on this roll. I bet I can shoot 4 more frames by the time I get back to my car though. Yeah, I never found 4 more shots. I think my creativity was drained. But hey, we all experience that from time to time. But how did I get along with the Exakta? Man, oh man, it was almost like I'd never picked up a camera before. The left-hand controls had me shifting focusing and shooting hands, and the preset lens proved to be a pain for me. I just couldn't help taking the camera from my eye to make sure I set the aperture correctly, even though I knew the aperture would stop at the f-stop I had set. I mean, it literally felt like I had never held a camera before. Another thing I had to be aware of is that the high shutter speed dial must only be turned counterclockwise, and there's a little arrow on this to show you. So changing shutter speeds might mean rotating the dial almost another full rotation to get to the speed that you want. So add that to the list of things that make this camera a challenge. And speaking of the shutter speeds, they are not anywhere near correct. I was sort of guessing that they'd all be about a stop slow, but I think a couple of them were closer to 2 stops off. It might not have been too evident in the photos, but there was a good amount of camera shake going on, especially on the shots at the mill. So this 70-year-old camera is due for a CLA. The bright spot in this exercise, though, was the lens. When focused properly, it's a very, very nice lens. And at wide apertures, the out-of-focus highlights look fantastic. All in all, I can't say this camera was an absolute joy to use. I've used older cameras that I've enjoyed much more, but those cameras were a lot simpler with many fewer shutter speeds and not a premium machine such as this. The Exakta is a highly complex camera, but I can also say that none other camera I'm aware of will let me shoot half a roll, take it out of the camera, and continue shooting the rest later. I'd also consider that your choice of lens for the Exakta can affect operation as well. Some lenses will have a stop-down mechanism connected to the shutter release, so you won't have to deal with a preset aperture. Now, I'm sure the more I use this camera, the more comfortable I'll become with it. But it's an excellent example of pushing the mid-20th century camera technology about as far as it could go at the time. In the decade following the release of this camera, we would see three major improvements in camera design. One, the instant return mirror, so there's no viewfinder blackout following an exposure. Two, combining fast and slow shutter speeds on the same dial, which would greatly reduce the complexity of shooting longer exposures. And three, automatic diaphragm lenses that wouldn't need to be stopped down manually. But taking the time frame into consideration, the Exakta is top of the line. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this little trip back to the mid-20th century. If so, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel. I'd really appreciate that. Also, be sure to share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And remember, you miss all the shots you don't take, so get those cameras loaded. See you next time.